There is a moment that almost everyone has had and almost no one talks about. You are in the middle of a spiral. Your thoughts are moving fast, stacking on top of each other. You are running through a conversation that already happened or one that has not happened yet. You are rehearsing something, regretting something, preparing for something that may never come. The noise is loud. You are deep inside it. And then, for just a second, something shifts. Something notices the spiral. Not a new thought exactly, something quieter, something that is watching. You have had that moment. You know exactly what I mean. That is not anxiety. That is not a symptom. That is one of the most profound capacities the human mind has. And most people have never been told what it is, why it matters, or how to use it. Today, we are going to talk about that. We are going to talk about the part of you that watches you think. This channel is about the mind, not in a clinical way, not in a self-help quote on a sunset way, in a real, honest, practical way. We look at how the nervous system actually works, why you feel what you feel, how your psychology shapes your daily experience, and what you can do with that understanding to live with more clarity and less friction. If you have been here before, welcome back. If you are new here, I am glad you found this. What we are exploring today touches on something called metacognition. That word sounds technical. I am going to make it feel like something you recognize from your own life because you have already been experiencing it. You just may not have had language for it. And once you do, something quietly changes. Not dramatically, not overnight, but it changes. Most people relate to their thoughts the same way you relate to weather when you forgot an umbrella. It is just happening to you. You are in it. You are soaked. You did not choose it and you cannot stop it. And the best you can do is wait for it to pass or find somewhere to shelter. That is actually a very accurate description of what it feels like to be inside your own mind during a hard stretch. During grief or burnout or anxiety or that particular kind of low-grade mental exhaustion where nothing is technically wrong but everything feels heavy, your thoughts feel like weather, constant, surrounding, out of your control. Here is what most people do not realize. There is a distinction the mind is capable of making that most of us were never taught. The distinction between being a thought and observing a thought. Between being in the weather and being able to, even briefly, notice the weather from somewhere slightly inside yourself. That noticing capacity has a name in psychology. It is called metacognition. And the stable part of you that does the noticing is sometimes called the observer self or the witness. Different traditions, different therapists, different researchers use different words for it, but they are all pointing at the same thing. You thinking about your job, and then you noticing that you are thinking about your job. That gap, that tiny space between the thought and the noticing of the thought, that is what we are here to talk about. Let me give you a concrete example, because this can feel abstract at first. Imagine you are lying in bed at night and your mind starts moving. You start thinking about something you said to someone. Was that wrong? Did they take it badly? Should you have phrased it differently? And then you are in it, full spiral. Your nervous system treating a memory from Tuesday like it is a live emergency. That is the thought. That is the weather. Now, at some point in that process, something in you becomes aware of what is happening. A small, quiet recognition. Something like, I'm doing the thing again. I'm spinning. It might last a second before you are pulled back in, but it was there. That brief moment of recognition is the observer. That is metacognition in action. You step slightly outside the content of the thought and notice the process of thinking itself. Most of us have that moment and then immediately try to use it as a lever to stop the spiral. We notice we are spiraling and then we try to argue ourselves out of it, or distract ourselves, or push the thought down. And that usually does not work, which is its own frustrating experience. But here is where the understanding shifts. The observer is not a tool for stopping thoughts. It is something more foundational than that. The observer is evidence that you are not only your thoughts, that some part of you exists at a slight remove from the mental content, watching, present, aware. That is not a small thing. That is actually a very significant thing. To understand why this matters, we need to talk briefly about how the brain processes experience, and I promise I will keep this simple. Your nervous system is constantly scanning your environment, internal and external, for information. It is building predictions. It is pattern matching. Most of this happens below the level of conscious awareness. You do not decide to have a thought. Thoughts arise. The brain generates them based on everything it has learned, everything it is currently registering, everything it is anticipating. When you are under chronic stress, this system gets tuned for threat. It starts finding patterns faster. It starts generating more urgent, more insistent mental content. Not because anything is wrong with you, because that is exactly what a well-functioning nervous system does when it has been living in a state of prolonged activation. The problem is not the system is doing its job. The problem is that without a stable observer perspective, you get fused with every thought the system generates. The thought becomes the reality. The prediction becomes the fact. The what if becomes the event. And this is where the witness perspective is not just philosophically interesting. It is neurologically important. When you can observe a thought rather than only inhabit it, you create what psychologists call cognitive diffusion. The thought and the thinker become slightly separate. The mental weather does not stop, but you are no longer only in it. You are also just barely watching it. And that distinction changes your physiological response. It changes what your nervous system does next. This is not about being detached or numb. It is not about going cold. It is about having a stable place to stand while the weather moves through. I want to address something here, because you might be feeling a certain kind of frustration as we talk about this. You may have tried things: affirmations, journaling, goal setting, mindset work, visualization. You did the things the books and the videos told you to do, and maybe some of it helped for a while. And then you were back in the spiral, back in the noise. Still feeling stuck, still feeling reactive, still wondering why nothing is actually shifting at a deeper level. If this is something you are actively struggling with, I made a longer breakdown where I walk through why conscious self-help tools often do not reach the part of the nervous system that actually needs to change, and what a more structural approach looks like instead. I will leave that linked below because this is the piece a lot of people are missing. But for now, I want to say this. That frustration is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is actually a sign that you have been trying. The issue is that most popular self-help frameworks work at the level of content. They try to change the thoughts, or replace them, or drown them out with better ones. And the observer perspective operates at a completely different level. It is not about the content of the weather. It is about developing your capacity to notice that you are in weather. That is a different kind of work. Let us talk about how this actually feels in practice, because I do not want this to stay theoretical. The observer perspective is quiet. That is probably the most important thing to understand about it. It does not announce itself. It does not compete with your louder thoughts. It is not a voice that says loudly, "Hey, you are spiraling." It is much subtler than that. It is more like a shift in texture, a momentary opening. Some people describe it as the moment just before they get swept back in, a half second of watching before the current pulls them under again. Some people first notice it during meditation or therapy or a walk alone when the mind gets briefly quiet. Some people have been noticing it their whole life and never had language for it. Here is what matters. The observer does not require a special practice to activate. It is already there. It has always been there. You have been using it every time you have ever said, "I caught myself doing that thing again." Every time you have paused mid-thought and recognized what was happening. Every time you have said, "I know I am being irrational right now, but I cannot stop it." That second part of the sentence, the knowing, that is the observer. The goal is not to create this capacity. The goal is to recognize it, to trust it, and gradually to spend more time there. There is a metaphor that I find useful here. Think about a lake. On the surface, the lake can be turbulent. Wind, waves, motion, weather. If you are swimming in it, you feel everything. The chop, the current, the cold. It is hard to get your bearings. It is exhausting. Now imagine you go deep enough. Below a certain depth, the lake is still. not because the surface stopped moving. The surface is still moving. But at depth, there is a stillness that the surface weather does not reach. Your observer is the depth. Your thoughts are the surface. They are both real. The motion on the surface is real. The stillness at the bottom is also real. They exist simultaneously. Most of us have only learned to live on the surface. We were never shown there was a depth to swim toward. And the practice of metacognition, the practice of witnessing your own thinking, is essentially learning to sense the depth, even when the surface is rough, even when you cannot stay there long, even when you keep getting pulled back up. The fact that you can sense it at all is the beginning of something. There's a phrase that shows up in a lot of different contemplative traditions and in more recent therapeutic frameworks like acceptance and commitment therapy, which is built heavily on this idea of the observer self. The phrase is, "You are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices your thoughts." That sentence can sound like a platitude. It can sound like something you put on a poster and then immediately stop noticing. But I want you to sit with it for a moment as something practical. If you are the one who notices your thoughts, then you have a stable reference point that exists independent of what any particular thought is saying. You have a part of you that can register a thought without being commanded by it, without becoming it. This is not bypass. This is not denial. You are not trying to talk yourself out of the thought or pretend it is not there. You are simply recognizing that the thought is arising in you, not constituting you. And from that recognition, something becomes possible. Not immediate peace necessarily, not instant relief, but a kind of quiet spaciousness, a small but real distance between stimulus and response, between what arises and what you do with it. Viktor Frankl wrote about this in terms of the space between stimulus and response and how human freedom lives in that space. The observer perspective is how you access that space, not theoretically, practically, in the middle of your actual life. Let me give you something concrete to work with. Not a technique exactly, more of an invitation. The next time you notice that you are in a thought spiral or a mood that has its teeth in you or a moment of reactivity, I want you to add one small thing. After whatever is happening, even briefly, see if you can say to yourself, either out loud or internally, just 3 words. I notice this. Not, I should stop this. Not, I need to fix this. Not, why am I like this? Just, I notice this. That is it. That is the whole thing. What you are doing with those 3 words is activating the observer. You are creating the slight separation between the thought and the thinker. You are reminding your nervous system that something in you is watching, and that the watching self is a bit wider than the content of what is being watched. You will probably get pulled back in immediately. That is fine, that is normal. The surface of the lake does not calm down because you briefly remember the depth exists, but you will have touched the depth. And the more you touch it, the more familiar it becomes. The more you trust it, the more available it is in harder moments. This is not about achieving a permanent state of equanimity. Most of us are not monks, and we should not be trying to turn ourselves into ones. This is about adding one stable point of reference to your inner life. The witness, the one who watches, the quiet part that has been here the whole time. I want to end with something that I think is important to name. A lot of what gets called mindfulness or self-awareness or inner work gets framed as effort, as something you do, as a practice you have to build and maintain and get right. And for some people, that framing is helpful. It gives structure. But for a lot of people, especially people who are already exhausted, already overcorrecting, already hard on themselves, the idea of another thing to do, another way to fail, another standard to not meet is just more weight. So I want to say this clearly. The observer is not something you have to build. It is already there. You have not been failing to develop it. You have simply been unaware that it exists. And now you are a little more aware. That is genuinely enough for today. You do not have to do this perfectly. You do not have to meditate for 45 minutes or journal every morning or overhaul your entire inner life. You just have to notice sometimes that you are noticing, and let that be interesting instead of effortful. Your nervous system is not broken. Your mind is doing exactly what minds do when they have been living under pressure for a long time. And inside all of that, right now, as you watch your own thinking about this video, there is a witness, quiet, patient, here. That is not a metaphor. That is you. If this way of looking at the mind resonates with you, there is a lot more where this came from. This channel is about understanding your psychology at a level that actually changes how you move through the world. Not through motivation, not through discipline, through understanding. Because when you understand why something is happening, the grip it has on you starts to loosen naturally, without forcing it. If you want more of that, subscribe. I make videos here consistently, and every one of them is built around giving you clearer, more grounded language for your inner experience. And if you are in the middle of feeling stuck, particularly if you have been doing all the conscious work and still not moving, the video I mentioned earlier is linked below. It gets into the mechanics of why surface level change often does not hold, and what it looks like to work with the deeper system instead. Worth a watch if that is where you are. You are not as lost as your thoughts say you are, and the part of you that knows that has been here the whole time.